My name is Wazir Khanum. I was born sometime around 1811. I lived in the Delhi of 200 years ago, but my family was not from the city.
I am called Beni Madhav Ruswa, but in reality, I am a mere figment of my creator's imagination. My creator imagined me as an only child of my parents. And according to him, I was born in 1840 in Nizamabad, Azamgarh.
I was born in a place called Kala Kankar House in the city of Pratapgarh in 1935. I came from a middle class Indo-Muslim family where a study of literature, a study of poetry is considered to be just one of the usual thing to do. It's not that you have to acquire it.
My father was a maker of plain gold ornaments in Delhi. My father's ancestors came from Kashmir.
I am of Rajput lineage, and I was orphaned in the Great Revolt of 1857.
Wazir Khanum and Beni Prasad Ruswa can be found in author SHAMSUR Rehman Faruqi's books. 79-year-old Faruqi lives and works out of Allahabad. While his is a respected name in Urdu literary criticism, it is with his poetry and his fiction that SHAMSUR Rehman brings alive the world of 200 years ago.
Memory of my having been survived in bits and pieces, like fragments of torn and forgotten sheets of writing. Some remained, lodged in dark corners and under furniture, but most were swept out with the accumulated dust of passing years. Of those who looked for me, at least one rejected the notion that the past is a foreign country and strangers who visit there cannot comprehend its language.
Growing up as the sole offspring, I was the apple of everyone's eye, the center of everyone's prayers and good wishes. And I wanted to be a poet. My creator wanted me to be the poet that he wanted to be. But like in my fictional life, his poetry became secondary to what he had to be.
In 1966, when I was in Allahabad, and with the encouragement and support of my wife, I began to issue my magazine called Shapkhoon. That I found my voice and my field also. Because now I didn't have to wait for rejection slips from editors saying that sorry, you can't print your story, or if you can't print your essay or your poem. Now I didn't have to worry about that. So I felt that I should give up my fiction writing, which was my first love, and should also give up put my poetry on the back burner, very much in the back burner somewhere in the back of my mind, and concentrate on criticism. And thus, with the help of my magazine, which was now open for me, for my ideas, which were rather new and a little bit unconventional, I became an established critic in Urdu over the years. And later on, people identified me with the modern movement, the modernist movement.
I, Wazir Khanum, also known as Choti Begum, had been lost to history for a century and a half. But then, someone took the pains to write my life and bring me back to it. He joined the dots and filled the missing gaps as he saw it.
I should be able to create a world of my own, which should approximate to what I think the reality would have been or should have been about those people whom I am writing about those events which I am narrating, those places which I am talking about. So, to the best of my creative and imaginative recall and recreation of the past.
The story of life is his imagination, but the times I lived in were not. My love for poetry is not mine, but his, and with his research, he unveiled the edifice of my entire way of life. Mirza Bedil wrote,
"Oh, the thousands of themes that for all their brilliance and bold beauty, discouraged by the alien nature of language, remained hidden behind the veils of mystery." Two books, originally written in Urdu and now in the author's own translations into English, bring alive the world of 19th century culture that flourished and ebbed with the times. Set amidst an Indo-Islamic backdrop, giants of Urdu and Indo-Persian literature crisscross stories of love and longing.
In one of the stories of the sun that rose from the earth, I, Beni Madhav Ruswa, set out to meet Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib to have him sign a copy of his Diwan, a collection of his works. But it is not me, but my creator, who used me as an excuse to jump the barrier of time to meet someone he needed answers from. It was through me in 1862 that SHAMSUR REHMAN Faruqi questioned Ghalib in 2001.
It is certainly true that I am going back into Ghalib as a literary figure and trying to discuss some issues of literature, but that is only an accident because the story is about Ghalib after all. You cannot but take into account these things that were important to Ghalib and important for Ghalib and important for us. Now, Ruswa's bold treatment of Ghalib's literary beliefs, especially about his views about Indo-Persian or Indian-Persian writers, well, those again are my beliefs. In fact, Ruswa was not really so well qualified as to go into all that.
Of what use is it to bring Ghalib into your conversation? His heart is burnt to nothing, and you are in a place where they don't know Naziri from Qatil.
I wrote poetry, but none survived. The beauty of my physical presence remained mirrored on scraps of paper. But the splendor of my thoughts and words were lost forever. History remembers me as the mother of poet Dag Delvi, but none remembered that I too wrote poetry.
Wazir Khanam was a poet, that is what we have been told by contemporary accounts, but none of her poetry exists. I mean, at present, no record exists of her poetry as such. So I wrote all those poems myself.
Her glance has the effect of magic. Exactly. My beloved's tresses and links in a chain are alike. Exactly. On the white book of her face, the rays of morning light. Exactly. In that little white lane where I left my heart is a house like paradise. Exactly.
How many people have even heard of Wazir Khanam? All that they know is that maybe some people have heard that she was the mother of Nawab Mirza Khan Dao, the great poet, but that's all.
I am the reflection, the memory of the dazzlingly beautiful Wazir Khanum, a fiercely independent woman who took on a series of lovers and husbands and lost them all.
Of course, her independence of mind and her determination to determine her own life by herself, to choose for her own self, rather than be guided and governed by her parents or by convention and rules and all that. That is what I have inferred from her life. Those people, those readers of mine who want to read it as a historical novel or these stories, historical stories, they are not being just to me, because had I intended to write historical novels, I would have chosen some major characters and major events in Indian history, rather than these minor little things. And then, of course, these poor unknown poets of whom only you and I know, and nobody else knows. So the idea was to get into the cultural part of it, and the culture is best expressed among people of everyday life like you and me.
There is a reason why Shamsur Rahman Faruqi is obsessed with the times of Wazir Khanum and Mirza Ghalib and Daag. He believes that the literary and cultural treasure of their times cannot be allowed to be lost, because artificial barriers of politics and societies have created boundaries that cut the flow of continuity.
Right now, what has happened is that over the last 150 years and more, we were brought up to believe that much of our literature was not really good, not really good enough for any world assembly. And the ghazal, for example, has been facing attacks from all quarters, beginning from the early modernizers of the 19th century to the modern times. That it's not, different kinds of allegations have been brought against it. Similarly, the other poetry, which was like the Masnavi, the Qasida, and all the other older forms of poetry, they have generally been considered to be, just historical antiquities, historical curiosities of no use to us. We want to create some sort of a jointure between the past and the present. The past which has ceased to exist for us. That is our tragedy, the tragedy of the modern Indian in any language, in fact.
Without love, the pieces of a broken heart become scattered. His love worked the thread that bound together the pages of my story of sorrow. In Mirror of Beauty, I was given these lines to recite from the 17th century Persian poet Saidi of Tehran, and I hope to make my life a living commentary on it.
Richness, the power, and the beauty of it, a culture and a literary environment, a way of life, but still we really don't know about it much. How people wrote, why people wrote poetry, what was the place of a poet in the culture, how people loved, how people fought with each other, what was the way that they looked at their life and love and people and women and men. Well, all those things are gone. And so my effort has been to give them an entry into the past, to make them peep into the door of the past and look at the richness there, the power there, the glory and the variety there.
Every man that I ever loved was taken from me. Everywhere I looked for stability, I was cast adrift. In the telling of my story is painted the detail of an entire civilization, a whole way of life, and the influence of the Dastan form of narrating a story.
The Dastan taught me what not to do while writing a modern novel, because the Dastan's great power is that it's an oral narrative, and being an oral narrative, it is supposed to identify with the audience, and the audience is supposed to identify with the Dastan narrator, or the Dastan, you can say. Whereas here the fiction writer is expected to remain aloof. Bia o joshe tamannae didanam bingar. Bia o joshe tamannae didanam bingar. Jo ashk az sare mishgan chakidanam bingar. Jo ashk az sare mishgan chakidanam bingar. He says, the intensity of my longing for your sight, come and take a look. The intensity of my longing for your sight, come and take a look. I am about to drop like a tear from the eyelash, come and take a look. Poetry moves through the dastan everywhere like a living reality. So that also was an important, for me, important creative input, that poetry can be used in this way, the way it was used in real life, or at least what I thought was real life in the 18th and the early 19th centuries. That poetry was a part of people's experience, people's everyday experience, and not only something that is shut down in books.
I am the sun that rose from the earth, but the sky of poetry is bright because of me. From the 9th Divan of Sheikh Ghulam Hamadani Mushafi, collected and printed 185 years after his death. The poet Mushafi later wrote, "Now the poet's life and means of livelihood is that they hawk poetry's merchandise from door to door. None accept it, even for free. Humiliated, they come back home. Woe to poetry." Like the mirror of beauty, for the sun that rose from the earth, Shamsur Rahman Faruqi had to perforce do the translations into English.
And I was driven into it because there was nobody else to do it. So they approached a number of translators, but they, in English I mean, but somehow they didn't, they drew a blank, or they got a complete refusal. So my children said, look, come on, you should try to do it yourself, why not? So that's how I went into this business, not because of any particular desire to be known in the English world as a fiction writer, but because circumstances conspired to make me an English writer or translator of fictions.
In the times that I lived in, Delhi was still the heart of India and the life of the world. As Mirza Ghalib said in a Persian verse,
I asked, "Tell me now, what is Delhi?" My guide said, "It is the soul and the world, its body."
We learned to venerate Ghalib because Ghalib was presented to us by the early modernizers as a person who is closer to the inquiring mind, to the Western mind, and who can somehow talk to us across the space and time that separates us from him. बातें हमारी याद रहें, फिर बातें ऐसी न सुनिएगा, पढ़ते किसी को सुनिएगा तो देर तलक सर धुनिएगा। गर्म अशारे मीर दरूना दागों से ये भर देंगे, गर्म अशारे मीर दरूना दागों से ये भर देंगे। जर्दरू शहर में फिरिएगा, गलियों में नए गुल चुनिएगा। दिल की तसल्ली जबकि न होगी, गुफ्त शुनूद से लोगों की, आग फूंकिएगी गम की बदन में, उसमें जलिए भुनिएगा।
With his daughters grown up and living away, with his partner in life gone away, with his grandchildren in cities far away, it is the way of literature, a path of words surrounding him, that he contemplates the nature of what should be.
Gradually, I began to feel that I should also try to understand the past better than what we had been taught to understand so far. But there are bigger issues of human life, of pain, of suffering, of the questions of the inner self, and conflicts and loyalties and so forth, which have to be addressed. My idea was to let people understand that without the past there can be no present, and without the past there can be no future either. So you must know what exactly you have lost or what exactly you could gain.